How to Fail: Everything I've Ever Learned from Things That Went Wrong. Elizabeth Day. Fourth Estate, 2020. Many useful tips to help those who have experienced moments of failure in their lives. Recognize that failure is not a destination, but a stage on the road. Learn how to transform a negative experience into a strength. The author. Elizabeth Day is an English journalist and writer who collaborated with The Observer from 2007 to 2016 and has published 4 novels. Her life is marked by what she initially experienced as a series of failures, a messy divorce, and several unsuccessful fertility treatments, among other things. In 2018, she decided to launch the podcast How to Fail with Elizabeth Day, in which she invited famous people to discuss how the various failures they have faced in life have helped them learn and grow. The present book is based on her podcast. Failure as a life experience from which to learn. From a very young age, we all experience, one way or another, what could be seen as failures. By instinct, we have a tendency to bring ourselves down, to see failure as the negative conclusion of a certain experience. When confronted with failure, we may at first not see that these experiences are a plethora of lessons to be learnt. The mistakes we make don't only teach us not to repeat them, they are food for thought. The emotions linked to the feeling of failure harden our character, making us better and better at handling this type of situation. How social media has changed our perception of success and failure. In this day and age, social networks are no longer a reflection of who we are, but are rather designed to broadcast the image of who we would like to be. Celebrities use them to share their secrets to staying young and attractive. Friends post photos of their joyful families on holiday. Entrepreneurs brag about their success. What are rarely shown to us are the many failed attempts, the lost jobs, the arguments, the fears, the anxiety, the depression. Don't look for any signs of imperfection, as they are carefully hidden. Yet a minority of people, including celebrities, have begun to show their most vulnerable side, their imperfect existence. Some talk about their problems, from depression to eating disorders, revealing what makes them human. However, this could also become simply the latest trend, as if honesty were nothing more than a hashtag. Besides this, opinions are thrown at us left and right from anyone who dares to share them. Any topic or person can be constantly subjected to opinions and criticism, all too often negative, by those who, hiding behind a keyboard, assume that they have the right and even the duty to express their indignation and disagreement with what they are seeing. In the case of a failure, the risk of remaining in the spotlight is so high that it often leads us to stand still, to not mention our failures, to not seek help. Negative experiences are never pleasant, yet they allow us to mature and face life with an awareness of the choices we make. One way or another, failure is something that we will all have to face at some point. Therefore, let's try to live it in a positive way, not as a catastrophe from which we cannot recover. When we face it in the right spirit, we then get all the tools we need to overcome it. Why do men and women experience and remember failure very differently? Men and women deal with failure in very different ways. Although this may seem just another stereotype about the difference between sexes, there are scientific reasons for this. The part of the brain responsible for controlling our mistakes and making decisions, the anterior cingulate cortex, is generally more developed in women. This causes them to form more powerful memories linked to negative experiences. Therefore, they are more likely to view their failures in a more negative light. Consequently, women often underestimate their abilities and have less confidence when applying for a job, for example, or a promotion. Why can failing at fitting in when we are younger help us as adults? As a child, it is not always easy to interact with others. We often feel excluded, unable to be part of the group. Let's take school, for example. This can lead us to alienation, which can make the situation worse. Often, parents and teachers urge us to try to fit in, perhaps by behaving more like others in order to be accepted. What not everyone realizes, however, is that poor socialization skills lead us to develop some behavioral characteristics that will be very helpful to us as adults. Being the outsider of a group, for example, leads us to observe behaviors and interactions more carefully, to consider the social mechanisms that govern an environment. The feeling of rejection that we can often feel is transformed into a kind of resilience, which can make us stronger. Furthermore, in this situation, one of the most important things we can learn is independence. It can help us to acclimatize to new situations, a fundamental skill for those working in a dynamic sector. And finally, personally feeling left out will make us much more empathetic towards those around us. We will be able to better understand who is in similar situations, perhaps a newly hired colleague or someone who is on leave. This empathy will allow us to become a reference point not only for them, but for the whole team. Why taking too many tests can have a negative impact. When we are young, our life is marked by a myriad of tests and trials. In theory, they should serve as a tool to evaluate our skills and our growth, but in reality, they hide much more. For a young person, taking a test may be a way of measuring oneself against the expectations of family, teachers, and peers. It becomes a tool for external evaluation, which defines, in many cases, one's self-esteem. Nevertheless, a test can only provide a partial self-evaluation, which is strongly influenced by many variables, such as the intention of the person writing the question, our state of mind and physical condition on the day of the exam, the examiner's mood, etc. The risk is that when our sense of self-worth depends on the results of the tests we take, our confidence will collapse with the first test that we don't pass. Growing up, we realize that there are rarely tests in the real world. No test gives us a score for correctly filling out a form or for the way we handle our savings. When you're an adult, no one gives you a score for giving the right answer. Why understanding the role of celebrities on social media is important. Of course, our obsession with celebrities did not start with social networks. From the golden age of Hollywood right back to the beginning of the last century, we have grown to revere famous people, those who have earned the title of a star, so to speak. For years, movies have shown us unattainable, almost perfect beauty standards. Teams of makeup artists, stylists, as well as surgeons made sure that the stars were always flawless, untouchable. Today, the situation is a little different. Social networks allow us to make direct contact with any star and see parts of their daily lives that were once kept private. This makes us feel closer to them, almost as if they were like us. The downside is that we see them posting pictures of expensive clothes, revolutionary diets, dream vacations, and we tend to compare our lives with theirs. This closeness that we feel is why the comparison appears to be valid, yet we often forget that behind these photos and stories, there are almost always advertising agreements or sponsorships. We also forget that no matter how much they want to seem like ordinary people, these personalities often live in a completely different world. Following a famous person on social networks is not necessarily a bad thing, although we should always remember that seeking to emulate their often expensive lifestyle will not make us stars. Why it's important to learn to say no. When at work, especially at the beginning, we tend to accept any kind of request. As the newcomers, we are left with all the more tedious tasks, which others refuse to do. We accept them, almost thanking our colleagues for giving us the opportunity because we believe that it will make us grow. Unfortunately, this is not exactly the case. Accepting a task or a job that someone else does not want to do, or perhaps at a lower price if we're self-employed, may create dangerous precedents, which in turn can lead us down a dead-end road. Learning to say no is a very important step for anyone who wants to build a career based on the rules they set for themselves. When it seems that we have lost an opportunity, making us feel like we have failed, one of the things we gain by learning to reject certain offers is the value of our time and our work. By doing so, we can invest in ourselves and at the same time be recognized for what we are really worth. Why anger is a more complex feeling than it seems. We all feel anger, and each of us controls it in our own way. However, anger is perceived in a profoundly different way depending on whether the subject is a man or a woman. An angry woman is often seen as hysterical, unable to control her emotions, even when that anger can be justified by years of torment and abuse. If a woman shows that she is angry, society often sees it as extreme, unwomanly, and wrong. In contrast, an angry man is often seen as manly, strong, determined. Think, for example, of countless films in which we see a hero, a man, who uses his anger to get revenge for the injustice he has suffered. For years, this has led women to internalize this feeling, to lock it up. The deep misogyny that, even today, permeates our society tells us that women's anger is the consequence of some mental disorder, hiding what it could actually be: strength. Thanks to the Me Too movement, more and more women are finding the courage to shout out their own anger and expose the inappropriate behavior they have had to suffer in silence for years. The day women can express themselves on equal terms with men is when we will be able to say that we live in a fair society. Why success is not the opposite of failure. What does it mean to have success? For a writer, it's having many readers who buy their books. For a singer, it's selling a lot and singing for thousands of people. For an actor, it's performing for great directors in big productions. Every profession, every path has its standard definition of success. But it is also possible for failure to be successful. For many, mostly for those who are successful enough to be recognized or even followed by their fans, the experience can be daunting. It doesn't mean they don't appreciate what they have. It means that success is often very different to what we're told it is. For this reason, when a successful person manages to be open and honest about their problems, about the challenges they faced not only in the past but also in the present, we can learn a lot. When a person who seems to have everything manages to show us their vulnerabilities, we feel more connected to them and are able to see their human side. They help us understand that success is not necessarily something tangible and material, and that money cannot actually buy happiness. True success, if we want to call it that, is the happiness that each of us can only find within. Once we understand what is truly important to us, we will really know if we are happy. Quotes. Out of crisis has come clarity, and sometimes even catharsis. At just the point when success has become the all-consuming aspiration, shame is now a public condition. What does it mean to fail? I think all it means is that we are living life to its fullest. We're experiencing it in several dimensions, rather than simply contenting ourselves with the flatness of a single consistent emotion. Take-home message. Failing is often seen as the end of something, but how can we be sure of that? Anyone who's ever been successful will tell us otherwise. Failure is an experience everyone will face in life, and we must learn to deal with it properly. From finding the courage to be ourselves while not having to change to please others, to being in control of our career, we need to remember that failure is not the end, but often the beginning of something even greater.